hutches. There are so many designs and blueprints for you to be able to do yourself. You will probably find something that will fit your circumstances. Yes?
If you have one with a built-in run, is that an issue for them digging?
It can be. Thank you. That's an excellent question. Right down here you'll see possibly, and I'll have other photos as well, there's no anything on the ground in this hutch. Rabbits dig. They naturally hide themselves from predators, and their favorite way to do that is to dig. So they will dig out from underneath something like this if left unattended or if precautionary measures are not taken. And some of those measures I'll get to in, I believe it's the next slide. This was how we got started. This was our very first rabbit hutch. This is a store-bought cage. This is a cage we built ourselves from wire, rolled wire we bought from Farm and Fleet. And up here we made another custom cage with a box that we made in it. And we put a tarp over it. This shelf and this top are an upcycled futon frame we found on the side of the road in Cedar Falls during move-out season. And the sides are all made from pallets. You can go, if you don't know where to find them for free, at the very least, you can go to Ace Hardware, and if they have them from their shipments, they sell, depending on which manager you talk to, you can get them for free or they'll sell them to you for no more than $2. So you can get pallets. Even if you don't do anything with rabbits, if you do stuff with recycled pallets, they're a good place to start. And so that's just how we got started. It's not pretty, but it works. And when you're starting out in self-sufficiency, a lot of the time, just good enough is perfect. Colonies are something that I have not tried. This is the only living situation for rabbits that I'll show you I've not experienced myself. But the idea is you have a big open area that's enclosed and you let them live and socialize together. It's great. They get all the exercise they need, everything like that. They get to be rabbits. They get to live their natural life. But they can dig out. If it's a place like this, if it's outside, you can do them inside, but then you have to clean up after them because that poop's not going to work itself away. And they'll step on it and make it into a nice muddy layer if you don't take care of it. They require a larger space. If you put your does and your bucks in the same one, most people don't do that, but that makes it impossible to track who's breeding with who. But usually people keep a smaller offset section for their bucks. Because usually you have more does than bucks. It's easier to control your genes that way. But you can do it outside, and they have these actual nice commercial-made hutches. They have trees. Down here you have Rubbermaids. You can do this. As long as you have the space, you can figure out a way to do it if you want to. So, yes, sir?
How many does can one buck handle? Or why do you need more than one? I guess my question to make that.
Some of it is timing. Bucks will try and breed throughout the day, but eventually they're going to hit a wall. If you have 15 does and one buck, he's only going to be able to do what he needs to do for probably 4 or 5, depending on the breeds and the sizes. So usually like 3 to 5 does per buck is a pretty good ratio. Anything above that, you're starting to strain the buck. And there's another issue with breeding that we'll get to that I'll expand on that further. Thank you, though. That's a great question. And yeah, I'm curious to try this, but there are some things that make it, like a lot of the kind of the hazard, because then if you want to try and grab a rabbit to do something, to trim its nails, to just check its health if you see it has something wrong, you gotta catch one. If you've never tried catching a rabbit by hand, have fun. I've never been able to do it by myself. We've had a couple times that pretty much every one of our breeders at some point has played Houdini. One of them pretty much does it by accident. He just finds a way to get out, and he doesn't really mean to, but he does. But I've never been able to catch one by myself. They're extremely fast, and they will jump higher than you think they can if they feel you're trying to get them. I stacked 2 Rubbermaids about this tall outside trying to block off an area so I could try and corner one of my does. From 3 feet away, she turned at it, took a couple strides, cleared it. About yay tall. It was crazy. I was pretty impressed, but also muttered under my breath things I shouldn't repeat. Tractors. Personally, these are my favorite setup. That thing that I was building in that photo I showed before, that's what it was. And the idea is you have the security of a cage, you have the confinement that makes them easy to handle, you can adjust them to the size you need, but they're also mobile. So you can take them to new ground every day, and the idea behind tractors is that they actually forage, they eat what they're supposed to eat. So if you want them to have a natural diet, this is a great way to do so. You're going to need a little bit more space, but you can do it in a yard. You can group them together or keep them individual. Like Joel Salatin, the same guy that I was talking about earlier, this is how they do rabbits outside of winter. They breed them and they put the litters in these, and they do wood slats on the ground. So the grass still sticks up through, but they can't dig out. And I've tried with just putting cage on the bottom and wood slats. Wood slats work a lot better. Cage tends to just press the grass down in clumps, where no matter how you shift it, slide it, set it up, or set it down, it's always going to stick up through the wood. It always has a continuous linear area that it can break through. And they'll graze it, they'll be happy. The main thing is they're outside, so you have to be careful to make sure they're predator proof. And there is manual labor involved. You're going to have to move the thing. The first one I built, I made it way too big, and I made it out of wood. It was awkward and it was difficult, and my area that I tractored them through was very hilly. It had very few actual level spots. So, learning experiences, all of them. But again, like this one up here, it doesn't have a bottom. If you're curious and you want to get into rabbits and you want to go with this method, wood slats. I highly recommend them. They're probably one of the smarter little things I've learned about rabbit raising in the recent past. And then this is ours. These are our rabbits. This is the first half. Well, I shouldn't say that. This is half of the original tractor that I built. It was too big, I cut it in half, and this has two sections. On this one, it's halfway done. On this side now, there's another box just like that one with lids on the top. And it's the wood slats on the bottom, it's lightweight, easy to move. You can put wheels on them, it makes it easier, but you don't have to. But this is a better shot of the inside. You can see clover and the grass. As long as it's untreated, the people in the community or yourself don't spray it with anything, they can, for the most part, they can eat it. If you're out in the country, there's something, you need to be more cognizant of what your local plants are that grow amongst your grass. Like creeping Charlie. Anybody here ever heard of creeping Charlie? It's terrible if you're around here. Just miserable. That is extremely toxic to rabbits. I lost one kid that ate creeping Charlie and just keeled over and died. And I knew it was there, but he found some buried under grass. And so that's one of the risks, is you have to be very familiar with what your local fauna, or no, flora is. Yes?
I have a couple comments.
Yes.
The slats are big enough for the kits to fit between, but they don't dig when they're that young, but you will want to keep an eye on it if you have babies in there, especially when moving it.
Yeah.
Because they can fit between the slats.
Yeah, and they can, and for us, have fallen through. Fortunately, they don't have that fight or flight instinct so
They
much.
just get really confused.
So they just kind of sit there and go, what just happened? And you can pick them up if you have two people, otherwise you have to really be careful moving it so you don't crush them setting it down. But like she said, they don't have that instinct yet. That's a mature instinct they develop to dig. So they don't have it. So you don't have to worry about kids digging out until they're older and way too big to fit through that.
And the parents did learn that when we started to move, they get in the boxes.
Yes, rabbits are extremely intelligent. You can potty train them like a cat. Literally, you can get all the stuff you get for a cat in its litter box, and they'll do that. And even if you don't, they naturally tend to pick the same place to poop. So they learn patterns very well. So when they see us come over and grab these handles, they're gone. They're in there, and they're not going to come out until it sets back down, and they know there's new food, so they go right back out and get to eat and sat. So another thing to think of for tractors, though, is the weather. You have to keep an eye on the weather. If it's going to be raining, you need to have cover. If it's going to be cold, you shouldn't be leaving them outside if it's going to be cold. Right? That's common sense. For most people, unfortunately, it's not so common.
Well, what is cold for a rabbit?
For a rabbit, cold is...
Depends on the breed a little bit. Ours, I would say anything, especially with wind chill below 10 below.
Yeah.
They don't really start feeling it. They're
Yeah.
lots of fur.
They stay warm very well. Yeah, I'd say 10 below is a pretty good length. You should not stress them to that point. You should take precaution to not expose them to that cold. But they can handle stuff like that. again, depending on your breed. But they're very well adapted. And if you felt any of these pelts, that's some pretty thick fur. It's a lot of short fibers, and so they compress well and they hold the heat well. But they also use it to cool off well in the summer when they need to. Food. Basically, there's 3 types of food. You have pellets, which you can buy at Farm and Fleet. 40-pound bag is what we get. 40-pound bag of, I forget what it is. Purina? No.
Oh.
No, it's
Pro something.
But, yeah. But it's a 40-pound bag for about $13. You can get a 50-pound bag of something else for about $15 or $16. Just make sure you're cognizant of what the nutritional differences are so that you can make a smarter decision about what you're feeding, because that's directly going to change and affect the food quality. But if you're feeding pellets, make sure you give them hay. Normally you want to feed, we feed ours twice a day. Once we feed them hay, once we feed them pellets. Rabbits are nocturnal, they're active, well, they're not really nocturnal, they're crepuscular, so they're most active at dusk and dawn. And so that's usually the best time to feed them if you're awake. If not, as close as you can get, but they like consistency. If you're constantly changing when you feed them, it's not so good for their metabolism and their dietary system. And it'll affect the rate at which they gain mass. Another one you can do is the advantage of tractors, a more natural diet. You give them forage. They love clover. They adore clover. If you sat a rabbit in a field of clover, that thing would be flat very fast. But it's great because that's what they're made to eat. The pellets are fine. It contains fiber and protein and most of the stuff they need. But at the same time, grass is pretty much keeping a rabbit if you're going to be keeping them outside. So it's available and you won't have to mow your lawn as much. Fodder. This is a recent discovery that I've made. I have yet to try it, but from everything I hear, it sounds like it meets almost all needs. What it is you take grains, unchemicalized, because that's a word, but you take organic grain seeds, you soak them for 12 hours, and then you put them in a tray, and you water them once a day, and they sprout up. Anywhere between 7 and 9 days, they're up like this. And you go ahead, you can pull the whole thing out because there's no soil involved. All of the mass that's down here is just roots, and the rabbits can eat that just fine as well. That's where a lot of the plant nutrients are. So you pull that out, you break it up, you feed it to them, and you have fresh, healthy green food that grows from seed to feed in 7 to 9 days. All it would be is you take a tray out, depending on how many you are. If you only have a breeding trio, as it's called, 2 does and a buck, one of these should be able to feed all 3 of them for that meal. And you just give them one every day, replant it, and you're good. And what I hear is best is barley. You give it to them while it's still green. It still has all the nutrients of the grain, all the protein, everything. That really the only thing you need to worry about is, depending on which grain you use, some vitamins may need to be supplemented. Usually I think it's like vitamin A. But even that is fairly minimal. So that's something I intend to try. I cannot offer any personal experience on it, but everybody I know who feeds this way swears by it. And I've been trying to find somewhere around here to buy seeds to start with. I haven't had any luck so far, but I'm still looking.
But do you know, so that's not one that you make, right?
No.
That looks like water at the bottom, is it?
Yes.
Smells through?
The way it is you water it from the top. In this kind of system, usually they're done vertically like this. You water it from the top, and there's either a hose or holes in the bottom of each tray, so it trickles down to the next tray, and it collects the water. And then you just use that same water to soak your seeds for the next go-around. Yes, sir?
Did you say you need supplements with the barley?
I'm sorry?
You need vitamin supplements with the barley?
With barley, I don't believe so. But with some of the grains, depending on what's available and what's most economical for you at the time, you may need to do so. You can do barley, oats, wheat, pretty much any of that stuff.
Would it be possible to use deer plot feed?
Yes, that is actually a recommended start. If you can't find seeds anywhere else, you can use just what you find at like Farm and Fleet to plant for animal forage in the woods. And that'll do fine. It's usually a good mix of grass, clover, legumes. So it's usually a bit more expensive because usually it's commercialized for deer hunters. But It's an option if you would like to try it. So basically, if you do want to get started, how? Figure out why you want them. Do you want them for meat? Do you want them for fur? Do you want to sell them as pets? That's an option I didn't cover. You can breed them and not have to harvest any animal at all for any purpose. You just breed them and sell them as pets. So just figure out what you want, and that'll help you identify a breed and a setup that's ideal to you. Because that's what's most important. You're looking at other people's operations are best for ideas. Don't copy and paste, because it's probably not going to work. Because whoever it was, if they have a successful operation, they had to make mistakes along the way to get it to where it is now. If you try and copy and paste, at least without talking to them, it may not fit your situation. You might even run into different problems that they had to deal with. But you're going to have to learn it all from them, so you might as well just start from scratch with what you know would be best, or at least what you think. Again, check your local laws, be aware, study, and make sure your space is ready for them before you bring them home, because apparently some people don't do that. Again, uncommon sense. But if you can, visit your breeder before you get them, or even while you go get them. Contact your breeder beforehand and go see how the animals live. Are they treated right? Because that's going to make a difference into your success starting out. If it's a questionable facility or farm that breeds them, you may not know that, and they might have health problems if you don't go there before you bring them home. And then bring them home. These were our starters, and they're small enough to fit in a laundry basket. We can't even fit one in there now. What's the time now?
58.
Okay. Well, if anybody's curious, I had quite a bit more just in case. Real quick, I said I'd cover it. If you're nervous about killing rabbits, if you want to raise your own food, you care about where it comes from, you're going to learn to care for your animal. And even the breeders, you want the breeders to have a good life, but you want your fryers and your feeders to have a good life too. Because ultimately, they're sustaining you. You're not sustaining yourself, technically. Another organism is giving up its life for that. So if you respect that from the beginning, and you try and collect your animal in the most humane way possible, in the most respectful way possible, that makes it a lot easier. And you appreciate that food so much more when you put your first piece of rabbit meat into the skillet, or wherever you do it. It was almost euphoric when I did it for the first time. It was crazy. But there are several ways you can harvest the animal, decide what makes sense and what is of let's say, ethical importance to you that makes sense, the most humane. Because technically, according to the USDA and like the Trapping Association, like the National Parks Trapping, drowning is a humane way to kill an animal. I would never drown my rabbits. People use contraptions like these to break the neck, so that it's quick, supposedly painless. But in my eyes, I see the rabbit still alive for a little bit, and it's distressed. It may not be able to physiologically respond with the stress chemicals and hormones that change the flavor of the meat. That animal's still alive. So we have decided, even though it costs a little bit more because you have to buy pellets, we use a pellet gun. You let them sit and munch on green grass so they die with a good meal, and you pop them in the back of the head. That rabbit, they'll all kick no matter how you do it. They will still kick and spaz because that's what nervous systems do. But it's completely painless. You see it as soon as that rabbit moves. There's no life left in it. So it's deciding what you are capable of as far as how you feel your animal's life should be handled. So we try and respect the animal in the best way. Hopefully, if any of you decide to get into it, you will too. So if anybody has questions, I can skip over. If you have questions about breeds or anything, you can catch me in the halls for the rest of the day. Yes, ma'am?
How big is your rabbit? It says it doesn't fit in the laundry basket anymore. How big do they get?
Our rabbits. One looks like this, but he's not a Californian breed. He is a cross between two other breeds, but physically he is the description of this breed's perfect dimensions. It's bizarre. It's very strange. But they're a very good meat rabbit. They're the second most common meat rabbit in the country.
He's probably about 10 pounds,
Yeah.
and it's solid muscle right now.
Yeah. These are our does. They're Champagne d'Argents. They're considered the Black Angus meat of rabbits, I heard recently. We didn't know that going in, but they're great moms, and as you can see, they're a little bit smaller. They're usually
5 to 8 pounds. One of ours is 7. The other's probably 8.
Yeah, and
At least in the
that's-
winter right now.
That's genetics. They can grow as big as like 10 to 12 pounds, but ours are just genetically smaller. And this is the same rabbit, but she just had kids, so she's very small. Yes, sir.
From baby to adult, when do you, kill the?
Usually about 3 months, depending on how quickly they gain weight. We usually try and go around 5 pounds. You can do anywhere between 3 and 6 pounds live weight is what most people do.
It's
It just depends on.
the most efficient way to use the food you're feeding them because they won't get much bigger much quicker after that.
And it's not just meat, you can also keep the bones to harvest and use for like brewing stock. You can make a rabbit broth and it's great.
Do they get tough or taste bad if they're old?
If they're older, the meat's a little tougher, but the taste isn't really all that different. You really, after you do it, if you sit them in a brine for a couple days, that softens it up no matter how old they are. So even if they're older, if you soak them in a brine for like 3 days, then they'll soften up and they'll drain all the blood out. Yes, sir.
A couple questions.
Yes.
Rabbits are able to breed almost immediately, right, after they're born? So you neuter them?
In our experience, it was about 4 months for our does and maybe 4.5 for our buck.
So you slaughter them before that age?
Yes, usually we do it at about 3 to 3.5 months.
Okay. So then my next question is that, do you know what your break-even cost is for this whole thing, per pound of meat?
I have not been very good at keeping records for the past. I just started buckling down on it this year. But if you want to get with me after this, I can forward you some information from a larger scale operation that I know that has been keeping viable records. Usually if you have a breeding trio, just to sustain your breeders, two dozen a buck, it's a little less than $200 a year, depending on your feed and everything like that, just to sustain. Plus about maybe $5 per fryer that you raise. So, if anybody else has any other questions, please find me. I would love to answer them, but we need to get the next class.
You can also find me. I can answer some.
Yes.
Maybe not to the fullest extent, but.
So thank you, and hope you enjoy the rest of your sessions today.